Hi, welcome back to my INTP encyclopedia vlog. This video is not going to be very uplifting, unfortunately. This is kind of me dealing with crap. I hope, though, that this doesn't come off as just me kind of rambling and complaining about things. There's just a lot that I kind of needed to work through before I got back to work. So, this whole teaching thing is pretty rough. I like it, I really do, but it's a huge learning curve. I mean, having been in school for the last 6 years in college has been I've been kind of thinking, oh yeah, I can do this, I can just, emulate my professors and know exactly what I'm doing, but no, it's a lot harder than that. And one thing that I did not expect was there are a lot of unforeseen emotional triggers in this whole deal, and I did not expect to be so kind of emotionally caught up in it or triggered or just kind of thrown off base, I guess, by my students. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of come at me like a curveball that I wasn't expecting, and I probably should have. Thankfully, I have some good mentors. The problem is talking to my mentors about this stuff, because I don't want to come off as like needy, and I don't want to come off as like, oh, I can't do this, and I don't want to be like that bugging kid anymore. Although I know they're all willing to help me, so it's kind of my own anxiety that's preventing me from really seeking out kind of the help that I think that I need about for all of this stuff. So anyway, long story short, I'm teaching subjects that I happen to be, I don't know, I'm very emotionally involved in what I teach, in that my entire life has been devoted to this, understanding of truth and understanding of the content of what I'm teaching, and it's just very, very important to me because my entire life is devoted to it. I mean, that's what I do. I'm going to spend my entire life doing this. So when I see students just not making an effort to even think or read or do anything, and they don't take my word for it that this matters, and they're not willing to, I guess, kind of extend that trust to me as their instructor, to kind of help them work through this. They just want to take shortcuts and just kind of pay their fee and get their B. It makes me really mad. It makes me really upset. I had a student who emailed me saying that the homework was one big question and she wasn't seeing the connections between like news and myth that I was trying to have them see. And so she just said, oh, can I just propose my theory about how news and myth are connected via comics, and just write that as an alternative and give it to you? And I emailed her and I said, no, you can't do that, because the connection between news and myth is the basis for everything else we're doing in this class. We spent 3 weeks talking about how the categories of myth and religion and ritual can be used by anthropologists to study modern phenomena and modern media, and that these categories are useful, and that's the entirety of the last 3 weeks of lecture. So if she was actually paying attention and listening to me and kind of trusting, or at least giving me the benefit of the doubt that I know what I'm talking about, she would have seen that. And if she was taking good notes, she would have been able to reference those. So, and if she was doing the reading carefully, and actually getting out of her mental comfort zone, and and kind of really actually thinking about, okay, so the reading is proposing this connection between news and myth. Maybe I'm not getting it. Maybe I need to reread this. Maybe I need to think about this in a different way, or really sit and ponder this. No, she's just, nah, I don't see it. Can I just write about news and comics, or comics and myth? No, you can't. You can't just skip off like that. Another situation, I had a student who was very much like, I got his work back and I could tell that he's just either very confused, or he was not, I could tell that he was not doing the work in the way that this class is designed, to make him work, and he is not thinking in terms of the class, and in terms of the theories and methods and lenses that the class is requiring him to use. So he turned in some notes and some homework that was very personal, strangely, like personal reflection kind of stuff. So and I could tell that it was a matter of him not understanding. So I made a connection with him, and I said, "Hey, can we sit down and have a conversation about this? And I really want to, make sure that you're I can clarify some things for you and helps you get on the right page. I know you've been absent a couple of times. Let's sit down and touch base on this," because thankfully I got some advice from a mentor or colleague of mine that really this needed to be a sit-down conversation. So he said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And so I said, I'm going to come in on my day off. I'm going to drive an hour to come out here, sit down on my day off, and meet with you. I drove in on my day off. Thankfully, I was down there for some other event that I chose to go to, but I was still down there waiting in my office on my day off, and he blew it off. He completely forgot about our meeting that we had set up the day before. So I was just kind of pissed about that. And also in another one of my classes, it's a mythology class, mythology and religion class, and I asked the students to write an analysis of the myths they were reading, and kind of, connect the myths and analyze them and see what is the basic picture of reality that these myths are positing. How is reality constructed? How does the universe work? What is the metaphysic lying behind these stories that you're reading? So I got a reading response back, and I've been getting a lot of bad reading responses back, just like absolutely in addition to the fact that these folks are not paying attention to their writing at all, and they're just not careful, and it's just a lack of concern and a lack of attention in their writing, which is bad, but they're just kind of repeating stuff and they're not actually thinking about it, which makes me really mad, because this is worthwhile stuff to think about. It's absolutely worthwhile stuff. I got one reading response back that started out as an analysis, started out as actually answering my question, and then it turned into this very poorly written atheist ramble and rant about how religion is poison. And I'm like, well, atheist rants have a place, and they certainly serve a function, and you can certainly go on an atheist rant. I don't mind that you're an atheist. I don't mind that you think religion is poison, because that's a value judgment that's entirely, your right to make. However, you can't say that on a paper when you're responding to a very specific question and you're not analyzing the material. You don't get to have an opinion on this paper in this class about religion until you understand what religion is. And if you can't answer my question, I'm going to think, well, you probably don't really understand what you're reading, so you're having a negative response to it, and all you want to do is make this paper a platform for your personal opinions. I'm sorry, but until you understand the material, you don't get to have an opinion about it. That's just kind of how it works. In the final research paper, you can have an opinion about it, but that's only after you do research. You get to have an opinion when you can have an informed opinion. Other than that, I don't want to hear it. You can go talk to your friends about it, but I don't want to hear your rant, because it's stupid and off base. And honestly, I've heard a lot better. Thank you. I've heard a lot better. There's just so many well-written, well-spoken, extremely intelligent atheists out there, and this just makes atheism look like the most puerile, unintelligent, kind of, hormonal, idiotic, adolescent little phase that's just, it makes me so mad. It makes me mad when, dedicated people of faith go on rants against atheism when they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't know, people, or for example, I also work at a Protestant school, even though the school itself is not run by the church with which it is affiliated. it still draws a lot of students from that particular Protestant tradition, and so you'll get, and sometimes in papers you'll get from students a lot of anti-Catholic rants, about how, I don't know, the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon, or they're not real Christians, or people who just use the distinction between Catholic and Christian like that's a thing, in their papers, and it's just so silly and so stupid and so uninformed, as if like they get to just say this stuff and just ramble on about it when they don't know what the hell they're talking about, or they think they know what the hell they're talking about, but then they believe that their paper is a space in which they get to voice their own particular faith or non-faith traditional perspectives or opinions. And folks, this is an academic study of religion class. You don't get to have your personal faith tradition's opinion here. You just don't. You can hold those are your lenses, and you can't escape them. They're with you always. But this is a class about thinking about religious lenses rather than with them. So you need to actually do the work to set aside your own, personal opinions, to actually first do the work, do the thinking that's asked of you, and then you get to have an opinion. It just makes me mad. It's a lack of courtesy, and it's a lack of, care taken with their thinking that makes me very angry. That, and just the discourtesy of students showing up late, or, I don't know. Again, I get very strangely emotionally triggered by this, and I wasn't expecting to. So that's been kind of a difficulty for me. Sorry about that rant. That was kind of ranty and not happy. I'm sorry about that. But another thing that I've realized about this whole experience of teaching, just from my own knowledge about how my brain and my cognition happen to work themselves out as an INTP, is I find myself that, I find that I do the reading, obviously, that I assign my students, and I'm very familiar with it, and I jot down my own notes about what's important, but I don't spend the time to actually plan out my lectures. I kind of just go with the flow and just hop right in and do whatever the situation sort of calls for, using that very expansive, very interactive sort of extroverted intuition, to kind of judging where the conversation is going regarding the material and what their questions are, and kind of working myself through the model as I speak, just based on my own intuition. And also I have a very sort of clear introverted model, through my introverted thinking of what I need to talk about, and so I don't generally plan out my lectures. Sometimes that's worked pretty well, but other times I just waste a lot of time. So my time management has been kind of a problem. But it's funny because when I'm going into a new situation where I'm required to, say, like, interact with people or navigate a space or drive somewhere, I remember one time I went to a grad conference at UCSB, and I just nearly got run over by a dozen bicycles, and I was lost, and I parked on the wrong side of the campus, and I walked all the way to where the conference was held, and there was no signage, and I was so mad. By the time I got to this conference, I just did not speak to anyone. I was so mad because I had such a poor model of how to navigate that environment in my head, based on, no planning, no assistance provided to me as a conference speaker whatsoever. There was just no kind of previous preparation to help me navigate that physical environment, and it manifested, and it resulted in this situation that just made me just a kind of just shaking, angry, freaked out mess. So when it comes to having to actually navigate a physical space or do some kind of physical task or have some sort of sensory experience, I really need that written out, very clear previously constructed model that I can then use to figure out what I'm doing. But as far as the lecture goes, I'm just kind of rolling with it. I understand that's not very sound pedagogy. I've seen people do it really well, and I feel like if I really worked at it, I could get really, really good at it. But I don't think that's fair to my students, especially in my morning class when I just kind of waste a lot of time rambling and mumbling. Though they're not awake, so they probably don't mind. It was funny. I won't go off into that. Sorry, I don't have very much time left. But anyway, so this teaching thing is it's just hard, and I'm just struggling. The intellectual challenge is not the problem. The intellectual challenge is definitely not a problem at all. I mean, that's the easy, wonderful, stunningly hilarious, and joyful part about this whole thing. It's just the feeling, having a sense, having a somewhat tenable, somewhat recognizable sense of the atmosphere in my classes and how things are landing among them, or not having that sense at all and being very, very worried about it. I've kind of lapsed into a lot of very colloquial, very chummy, sort of unprofessional styles of speaking when I lecture, and I've wondered if that bothers my students. I don't know if it bothers them or not, especially my freshmen at the university I teach at, because I'm wondering if they think I'm a fake, or kind of a phony, or I have a huge imposter complex. I really, really have a huge imposter complex, and so I often wonder if they think that I'm just a big joke, that I shouldn't be up in front of them, and I'm just kind of a clown, and they think I'm a joke. So that's certainly an anxiety of mine. There have been a few joys in this whole thing, and it's come in the form of feedback from students. And really, that's the only source. I mean, I need that feedback. I need that affirmation, because I'm not a mind reader. I can't tell what their experience is until they tell me. I have really no idea, and I need that because I'm very anxious about it. So I did get an email from one of my mythology students saying that he was just so excited in class that day, and he'd never been that excited about a gen ed course before, and he really enjoyed himself, and he's just a sweetheart, and I've just been so glad to have him in class. So I'm just really glad that it turned out well for someone. And then I also had a student, first year maybe, a freshman in my Religion 100 class at the university, who was absent a few days and was definitely not doing the notes correctly, and emailed me saying, "Hey, did I do the notes correctly?" And I looked at his notes and I went, "Oh, I thought this was a horrible attempt to cut corners." I had this horrible reaction seeing his notes. And then when he sent me the email, I was like, okay, if he's asking me if he did them correctly, he's obviously doing something wrong on accident. I mean, this is not an on-purpose kind of fuck you, I'm not going to do my notes, here you can just take this crap sort of thing. It was definitely a I'm very confused kind of moment. So he made the time to come talk to me and say, I know I'm not on the right page, I know I need to be, I'm going to take the steps to do this right and to get on the right page. And he really took responsibility for his own learning, and I was so just kind of proud. I was just so happy that he made that decision. I was kind of shocked because, I thought, obviously I don't know what's going on in the background, I don't know what this guy's issues are, and then he told me, he's a football player, we went to Oregon this weekend and played a game, and I broke my toe and I had surgery yesterday. I was like, why didn't you tell me you had minor surgery yesterday? I would have been, that puts things in context for me. I can't expect people to be completely caught up on all their work if they were just, in surgery the previous day. So I realized I've been really, really nice. I need to stop being that nice. I need to stop being that forgiving. But it was just helpful for me to see a student take responsibility for his own learning. So things that I need to do, that I've realized I need to do, is stop assuming everyone understands what I'm saying. Stop saying or asking my students, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Does this make sense to you? Because they're just going to sit there and go, mm-hmm. And they're not going to admit that it doesn't make sense. So, and I also need to give them very clear guidelines about what I expect from them, from their work, because I'm not going to sit here and read crap anymore. I'm just tired of it. I'm really tired of it. And I want to see that they're getting something constructive from the experience of answering the reading response questions, because I don't give them reading response questions just because I need, like, crap to grade. I would really like to not grade crap. I mean, it's just exhausting. So I give them those questions as an opportunity to think a little bit more deeply about the things that they read, not that so that they can just, give me whatever they think I want. So I'm going to give them some very clear guidelines, and I think that I assumed that they understood the reason for those assignments. I assumed that they were using them as I intended them to be used, as an opportunity for thinking. But so many students these days look at a reading response question and they think, great, more homework, more stuff I have to make up. They don't think of it as an opportunity to ask deep questions about the things that they're reading and then generate some answers based on kind of a feeling their way through the text or using the tools that they learned in classroom, and I don't know. So I think I need to be a lot more obvious and intentional and forthright about my pedagogy and my choices and what I ask them to do, and also just be a little bit more hard-nosed, be a little less forgiving, be a little less wishy-washy, and just kind of hold them to the syllabus, hold them to their responsibilities as students, because I'm not gonna sit here and watch people just skate through. I don't have time for that, and obviously it bothers me on an emotional level. It bothers me that students can find something like this so unimportant, especially after I shared with almost all my students this news story of recently Columbia professor Pravjot Singh, who is also a physician and is an expert in community healthcare networks, was attacked in Central Park this last weekend, and it was a hate crime, and it was a hate crime based on the fact that he has a long beard and he wears a turban. So they screamed at him, terrorist, get Osama, and beat him to a pulp. The guy's now back at work seeing patients. So if that doesn't tell you that he has a dedication to serving his community, I don't know what does. But there's also just a serious problem of hate crimes in general, especially ones based on or sparked by a reaction to symbols of religious identity, whatever they happen to be, whether it's a turban or a hijab or a long beard, whatever religion or religious group they happen to belong to, whether they're Muslim or Sikh or what have you. I mean, this is a huge issue, that markers of religious identity in this country, obvious markers of religious identity, are seen as something foreign and strange and abnormal, when in fact that's the normal way of dressing and behaving throughout most of the world. And so we see these obvious markers of identity and we freak out because, oh my gosh, they have an obvious marker of their identity, and that freaks me out. I mean, it just is, it makes no sense. And so a misunderstanding of the place of religion in public life, but also in the lives and the identities of most of the people around the world, is just, it's a big problem. And so that's part of my calling and part of my sense of vocation with this teaching that I'm doing, because I mean, these are issues of justice for me. These are issues of ethics and educating people who are growing up in or currently living in a very globalized, very multi-religious world where that can possibly be a situation of either either it could be a situation of gross violence and misunderstanding, or it could be a situation for a lot of boundary breaking and good community building work. I mean, lots of people have religious identities and religious ethics that require them to work hard to serve their communities. And so if we see this multi-religious world and this very globalized world we live in as an opportunity for help and support and networks of help and support for the underserved and for the disadvantaged, I mean, how much better of a world could we live in? So again, when I see students writing this off or going on atheist rant about how religion is poison and they don't want to actually do the work to think about the sort of things that we're talking about in class, it just makes me upset and anxious about whether or not I'm doing a good enough job. And so that kind of feeds into my imposter complex quite a bit. So I hope that this hasn't been too ranty or too much just kind of like blah blah blah, I'm letting off steam. I really want to understand why these things trigger me and why I'm responding to certain aspects of this whole teaching gig in a very in a way that gives me room for pause and makes me think, wow, is this really the right job for me, even though I've been spending my entire last 6 to 10 years telling myself that this is the right job for me. So I just want to understand my reactions to this and why I'm going about being a teacher in a particular way, based on, some very handy tools given to me by Myers-Briggs. So these are tools, again, they're not necessarily accurate sorts of reality empirical based categories. They're just very, very helpful tools that seem to be making sense of things for me. So this has been a very ranty update, and I hope the next one will be better and a little bit more structured. So see you guys later. Have a good week. Work for justice. Don't judge people by what they wear. Don't judge people by the beards they have or don't have, or their hats, or their jewelry, or by the language they use. Don't attack people in the street. That's, kind of the message I'm hoping to send out. And also, don't represent people who happen to dress differently from the majority as objects of, kind of exotic interest. Don't classify them or represent them as some kind of unknown, unmanageable, possibly threatening other, because they're people and they deserve dignity and respect. So yeah, I encourage you to look up the news story on Pravjot Singh, and yeah, see you guys later.